Just cry and say, Mommy hurt you, baby. Can you do that for Daddy?
But why, Daddy? Mama did not hurt me.
Do as I say, Zara.
I froze behind the bedroom door. My husband's voice was soft, patient, deadly. Just cry and say, Mommy hurt you, baby. Can you do that for Daddy? Through the crack, I watched Darius wipe something under Zara's eye makeup. I realized with horror creating a bruise that didn't exist. The doorbell rang downstairs. CPS. He'd already called them. Before we go any further, if you're drawn to stories about mothers fighting impossible battles and truth-defeating manipulation, hit that subscribe button right now. This story gets darker before it gets lighter, and you need to see how evidence can dismantle even the most perfect lies. And stay until the end, because the moment everything unravels in that courtroom, you won't want to miss it. My name is Ella Whitlock, and I need to tell you about the night I discovered my husband had been planning my destruction for 4 months. But first, you need to understand who we were before everything shattered. I met Darius 6 years ago at a community fundraiser. He was magnetic, the kind of man who commanded attention without demanding it. Charismatic, well-spoken, passionate about social justice. He worked in nonprofit leadership, mentored young men, spoke at events about breaking cycles. Everyone loved him. I loved him. We married 3 years later. I had Zara from a previous relationship, and Darius stepped into her life like he'd been waiting for us. He was patient with her tantrums, creative with her bedtime stories, showed up to every school event. He called her our daughter, not your daughter. I thought I'd found the partner I'd always needed. But here's what I didn't see. The groundwork. The subtle isolation. The way conversations with my friends always ended with Darius looking hurt. I just feel like they don't respect our family until I stopped calling them. The way he'd reframe my concerns as attacks. Why are you always questioning me? Is this about race? Until I learned to stay quiet. For 2 years, I kept peace at any cost. I smoothed over tension, apologized when I wasn't wrong, convinced myself that marriage meant compromise. Darius was so good at making his control feel like protection. I'm just looking out for us, Ella. The world sees interracial families differently. We have to be careful. I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. Then, 2 months ago, things shifted. Darius started working late, taking calls in the garage, spending hours on his laptop with the screen angled away. When I asked about it, he'd smile and say, "Just work stress, babe. Nothing for you to worry about." He started documenting everything. "Did you remember to pick up Zara's prescription?" He'd text, even when he was home. "Just want to make sure she's getting proper care." Photos of the house, if dishes were in the sink. Screenshots of my social media posts with friends I hadn't seen in months, asking, "Who is this? Should I be concerned?" I thought he was being paranoid. I didn't realize he was building a case. 3 weeks ago, Zara came home from daddy-daughter time at the park acting strange, distant. When I asked about her day, she said, "Daddy says I need to remember things correctly." When I pressed, she clammed up, then asked, "Mommy, do you ever get really mad at me?" My stomach dropped. "No, baby. Why would you ask that?" She shrugged. "Just wondering." That night, I found Darius's journal in the garage. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for light bulbs. It was tucked behind paint cans, a leather notebook I'd never seen. The first page made my hands shake. Timeline started January 14th. Document everything. Ella's stress. Her short temper even when there isn't one. Create the narrative. Public perception matters. White woman, black father use it. People want to believe the protective black father. Zara's confusion reads as fear on camera. Practice the phrases with her. Make it natural. Page after page of strategy. Coached responses for Zara. If someone asks if mommy yells, say yes. If they ask if you're scared, nod and look down. Notes on my daily routine times I was alone with Zara. Moments without witnesses. A list of my friends with check marks next to their names, and the word handled. There was a tutorial on creating realistic-looking bruises with makeup. Screenshots of my text messages taken from my phone while I was sleeping. Recordings of Zara's voice saying, "Mommy was really mad today," played over and over until it sounded natural, not coached. And at the bottom of the last page, circled in red, CPS call scheduled February 10th. Final prep with Z on February 9th. Make sure E is home when they arrive. Maximum impact. February 10th was tomorrow. I stood in that garage, light bulb forgotten, reading my husband's playbook for destroying me, and I understood. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a custody dispute. This was systematic, calculated erasure. And I had less than 24 hours before it all came crashing down. That's when I heard his voice upstairs, soft and patient, talking to our daughter. I walked to Zara's bedroom, my heart hammering, and stopped just outside the door he'd left cracked. "Remember, baby," Darius was saying, "if Mommy ever hurts you, you need to tell people. Can you show me your sad face? Perfect. Now, what do you say if someone asks about Mommy?" Zara's small voice, uncertain. "Mommy gets really mad sometimes?" "Good girl." "And if they ask if you're scared?" A pause. Then, I don't know, Daddy. Mommy doesn't really—" "Zara." His voice sharpened. "We practiced this. What do you say? Sometimes I'm scared?" She said it like a question, like she was trying to please him. "Excellent. Now, let's practice your crying. Remember, think about when your goldfish died. That's the face we need." I watched through the crack as he dabbed something under her eye stage makeup, creating a shadow that looked like a forming bruise. The doorbell rang. Darius's head snapped toward the door, then back to Zara. "Remember everything we practiced, okay? Daddy loves you." Then he stood, transformed his face into concern, and went downstairs. I heard him open the door. "Thank God you're here. I'm so worried about my daughter's safety." And I knew, standing there, shaking, watching my 7-year-old wipe fake tears that her father had coached, that I was about to fight the most important battle of my life, against a man everyone believed, in a system that had already decided I looked like the problem, with 72 hours before they could take my daughter forever. This is the story of how I fought back. Not with emotion, not with explanations, but with evidence that couldn't be performed away. The CPS caseworker's name was Michelle Torres. She arrived exactly 72 hours after that first visit, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression I couldn't read, professional neutrality that somehow felt like judgment. I opened the door with hands I willed not to shake. Darius appeared behind me almost instantly, his hand finding the small of my back in what looked like supportive intimacy but felt like a warning. "Miss Torres, thank you for coming back," he said, voice warm with just the right touch of concern. "We want to cooperate fully. Zara's safety is everything to us. Everything to us. Like we were a united front. Like I wasn't the threat he'd reported." Michelle stepped inside, her eyes scanning our living room, the family photos on the wall, Zara's drawings stuck to the fridge with magnets, the general tidiness of a home that looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. Normal, loving, safe. I'd spent 2 hours that morning cleaning, then another hour trying to undo the obvious signs of cleaning. You can't look too perfect when someone's investigating you for abuse. It reads as cover-up. "Thank you both for making time," Michelle said, settling onto our couch. She placed her tablet on the coffee table, positioning it so we couldn't see the screen. "I'd like to talk with each of you separately, then spend some time with Zara. Standard procedure." Darius nodded, squeezing my hand. To Michelle, it probably looked like reassurance. I felt the pressure of his fingers just slightly too hard, just for a second, and understood. "Behave. I'll go first," he offered. "Ella, why don't you make us some coffee?" It was perfect. The considerate husband, giving his wife a task to calm her nerves. Michelle smiled slightly, appreciatively. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the kitchen, where I could hear everything but wasn't part of the conversation. Invisible. Exactly where Darius wanted me. Mr. Whitlock, can you walk me through what prompted your initial call? Michelle's voice was gentle, encouraging. Darius sighed, a sound of deep reluctance, like this pained him. I didn't want to believe it at first. Ella's been under a lot of stress. Her mother's health, work pressures. I kept telling myself it was just, normal parenting frustration. We all have moments. I gripped the coffee pot, measuring grounds with hands that trembled. But then Zara started getting quieter, withdrawn. She'd flinch when Ella raised her voice, which was happening more and more. And last week, I noticed a bruise on her arm. When I asked Zara about it, she got scared. Said Mommy grabbed her too hard when she wasn't listening. Lies. All lies. But delivered with such painful sincerity. That must have been difficult to see, Michelle said softly. It broke my heart. I love my wife, but I love my daughter more, you know? I can't ignore signs just because acknowledging them might hurt my marriage. His voice cracked perfectly. I'd rather lose Ella and know Zara's safe than stay silent and have something terrible happen. The coffee pot was full. I carried 2 mugs to the living room on a tray that rattled slightly. When I entered, Michelle was nodding, her expression sympathetic. Darius looked up at me with eyes that seemed wounded, loving, concerned. The performance was flawless. Thank you, sweetheart, he said, taking a mug. The endearment felt like acid. Miss Whitlock, if you're ready, I'd like to speak with you now. Michelle's tone was different, with me still professional, but cooler. She'd already made preliminary judgments. I could see it in the way she held her pen, ready to document whatever confirmed what Darius had planted. Darius stood, touched my shoulder, supportive husband, and walked upstairs. I heard Zara's door open, heard his low voice. Daddy needs to talk to the nice lady alone for a bit. Okay, baby? You watch your show. I sat in the space Darius had vacated, still warm from his body heat. Michelle positioned herself at an angle where she could see my face clearly. Miss Whitlock, your husband has expressed some concerns about your interactions with Zara. Can you tell me about your relationship with your daughter? I'd practiced this. I'd stood in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, rehearsing calm responses. But now, with Michelle's eyes on me, and Darius's lies hanging in the air, I heard myself over-explaining. I love Zara more than anything. She's my whole world. I would never, ever hurt her. Yes, I get frustrated sometimes, every parent does, but I've never grabbed her hard enough to bruise. I don't even know what incident he's talking about. She fell off the monkey bars last week at school, scraped her knee. But her arm? There's no bruise on her arm. You can check. And I haven't been more stressed than usual. I don't know why he's saying these things. Michelle's pen moved across her tablet. I was talking too fast, defending too hard. I sounded exactly like someone with something to hide. Has there been any recent conflict between you and Mr. Whitlock? Michelle asked. No. I mean, normal marriage stuff, but nothing serious. We're fine. We're good. My voice pitched higher. I heard how I sounded defensive, desperate. I forced myself to stop talking, but the silence felt worse. Can you tell me about a typical day with Zara? I described our routine breakfast, school drop-off, pickup, homework, dinner, bedtime stories, normal, mundane, loving. But everything I said felt like evidence against me. When I mentioned that Zara sometimes pushed back on bedtime, Michelle's pen moved faster. When I admitted I'd raised my voice last week when Zara ran into the street chasing a ball, Michelle's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. I was losing this. I could feel it slipping away with every word. Miss Whitlock, has Zara ever seemed afraid of you? No, never. But I heard the defensiveness again, sharp and guilty sounding. Michelle made a note. Thank you for your time. I'd like to speak with Zara now, alone, if that's all right. It wasn't all right. Nothing about this was all right. But I nodded, because refusing would look worse. Darius came downstairs as I stood. "How are we doing?" he asked Michelle, warm and open. She smiled at him actual warmth and said, "Just need to talk with Zara, and then we'll wrap up." He called upstairs. "Zara, baby, can you come down? Miss Torres wants to say hello." I watched my daughter descend the stairs, small and uncertain in her pink leggings and oversized t-shirt. She looked at me, then at Darius, then at Michelle, trying to read the room, figure out what was expected. "Hi, Zara," Michelle said gently. "I'm just here to talk for a bit. Nothing scary, okay? Just you and me." They went into the dining room. Darius and I sat in the living room, close enough to look united, far enough that I couldn't touch him. I strained to hear voices through the wall, but Michelle was too smart for that. She'd turned on white noise from her phone, standard practice for child interviews. 20 minutes passed. Each one felt like hours. When they emerged, Zara looked confused more than scared. Michelle's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw her glance at me, then quickly away. My stomach dropped. "Thank you all for your cooperation," Michelle said, packing her tablet. "I'll be reviewing everything and we'll be in touch within the next few days with next steps." Darius walked her to the door. "Whatever you need from us, we're here. I just want to do right by Zara." "You're being very cooperative, Mr. Whitlock. That's helpful." After the door closed, silence filled the house. Zara stood near the stairs, picking at her cuticles, a nervous habit she'd developed in the last month. I wanted to go to her, hold her, ask what she'd said, but Darius moved first. "Hey, princess, you did great. How about some ice cream?" Zara nodded, following him to the kitchen. Over his shoulder, for just a fraction of a second, Darius looked back at me. The mask dropped no warmth, no concern. Just cold calculation, assessing his work. Then he smiled at Zara, and the loving father returned. I stood alone in the living room, understanding with absolute clarity. Michelle believed him. Whatever Zara had said, however she'd said it had fit his narrative. I had days, maybe hours, before the system decided I was the danger. That night, after Zara was in bed and Darius was in the shower, I found my phone and searched for the recording app I'd downloaded that morning. I'd been terrified to use it, afraid of seeming paranoid, afraid of violating privacy, afraid of being the controlling spouse. Now I was just afraid of losing my daughter to a lie I couldn't prove was a lie. I checked my state's recording laws, single-party consent. Legal. I activated the app and slipped my phone into my pocket. When Darius came out of the bathroom, toweling his hair, I was sitting on the bed. He looked at me with false concern. "You okay? I know today was hard. What did you tell her?" I asked quietly. "The truth, Ella. That I'm worried about you. About Zara." He sat beside me, and I forced myself not to recoil. "Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. It might help with the investigation if they see you're getting help. Getting help for a problem I didn't have. Creating more evidence of instability." "What did Zara say to Michelle?" I pressed. Something flickered in his eyes. "She told the truth, too. That sometimes you get frustrated. That sometimes she's scared when you yell." "I don't yell at her, Ella." His voice was patient, almost pitying. "Maybe you don't remember. Stress does that." He was gaslighting me even now, building the narrative in our private moments so it would sound natural in public. "What exactly did you tell Zara to say?" I asked. "I didn't tell her anything. I just asked her to be honest." He stood, turning away. "But if you're going to accuse me of manipulating our daughter, maybe Michelle's concerns are justified." There it was, the threat wrapped in reason. Anything I said could be used as more evidence of my instability. I said nothing more that night, but my phone, in my pocket, had recorded every word. The Facebook post appeared the next morning. I was making Zara's lunch when my phone lit up with notifications, friends commenting, reacting, sharing concern. I opened the app with dread already pooling in my stomach. Darius had posted at 6:47 a.m., before I'd even woken up. The photo showed him and Zara at the park, her on his shoulders, both of them laughing. the image of perfect father-daughter joy. Below it, his words. Navigating a difficult family situation right now. Please respect our privacy during this time. Being a father means making hard choices, even when they hurt. Protecting my daughter is everything. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with support. We'll get through this. It was masterful. He'd said nothing explicit, admitted nothing specific, but the implications were crystal clear. Family crisis, hard choices, protecting his daughter. From what? He didn't have to say. People would fill in the blanks themselves, and they'd fill them in against me. The comments were already pouring in. Stay strong, brother. Zara is lucky to have you. Praying for you and your family during this difficult time. You're an amazing father. Whatever's happening, you're doing the right thing. Not a single person asked what the situation was. They didn't need to. Darius had positioned himself as the good parent, making painful choices, and everyone accepted the narrative without question. I scrolled through, feeling sick. These were our friends, people we'd had dinner with, celebrated holidays with, people who'd held Zara as a baby. And with one carefully worded post, Darius had turned them all into his witnesses. I started to type a response, then stopped. What could I say? He's lying? There's no family crisis? He's manipulating you? Every word would sound defensive, unhinged, exactly like what people would expect from the person Darius was painting me to be. I deleted my half-written comment and set down my phone. By mid-morning, the text messages I'd sent went unanswered. I'd reached out to 3 close friends. Sarah, who I'd known since college, Jen, from Zara's playgroup, Marcus, who'd been in our wedding. Simple messages. Can we talk? I need someone to listen. The read receipts showed they'd seen them. No one responded. At noon, my phone finally rang. Not a friend, my mother. Ella, honey. I saw Darius's post. What's going on? I closed myself in the bathroom, running water so Zara wouldn't hear. Mom, it's complicated. He's making it seem like something it's not. What do you mean? He said there's a family situation. Is everything okay with you two? No. Yes. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to organize thoughts that kept fracturing. He called CPS on me. He's telling people I'm hurting Zara. Silence on the other end. Too long. Mom? Ella, are you sure about this? Darius loves that little girl. I've seen him with her. He's devoted. The words hit like a slap. I'm sure that he called CPS with false accusations. I found his journal, Mom. He's been planning this. A journal? Honey, are you hearing yourself? This sounds... have you been stressed lately? Maybe you're reading things wrong. I'm not reading things wrong. He wrote it down how to coach Zara, how to make it look like I'm unstable. Okay. But why would he do that? What would he gain? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound paranoid. Control? Custody? The thrill of destroying me? None of it made sense to someone who hadn't seen the cold calculation in his eyes. I don't know why, I said quietly, but he's doing it. Another pause. Ella, I love you. You know that. But Darius has always been so good to Zara, and you have been under a lot of pressure. My health issues, your work deadlines. Maybe you just need to take a step back. Get some rest. Have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist? There it was. Everyone suggesting therapy, creating a paper trail that would document my supposed instability. Even my own mother doubted me. I have to go, I said, and ended the call before she could hear me cry. That afternoon, Jen called. For a moment, hope flared finally, someone reaching out. I answered on the first ring. Jen, thank you for calling back. I really need to. Ella, I'm calling about playgroup. Her voice was stiff, uncomfortable. We've been talking, the other moms and I, and we think it's best if you take some time away, just until things settle down with whatever you're going through. My throat closed. What? It's not personal. We just need to think about the kids, you know? And if there's a CPS investigation, We have to be careful about who's around our children. I'm sure you understand. I didn't understand. I understood nothing except that the walls were closing in. Jen, there's nothing to investigate. Darius is lying. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of a marital thing, but Darius has always been so great with all the kids. He volunteers, he coaches soccer. He's been nothing but wonderful. So if he's concerned enough to call CPS, there must be something real there, right? No. Wrong. He's manipulating everyone, including you. Ella. Her voice dropped, gentle and pitying. Please get some help. For Zara's sake. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, holding a phone that had become a weapon against me, and felt the isolation lock into place. Darius had done this methodically. The Facebook post was public positioning. The private conversations he'd had planting seeds of doubt, mentioning my stress, asking friends to keep an eye out, were building a consensus. And now, one by one, everyone I might have turned to was stepping back, protecting themselves and their children from the problem I'd been painted to be. By evening, I'd made a decision. I needed a lawyer, not a family friend who'd known us both, not someone Darius could influence. I found a family law attorney through an online search, Sharon Martinez, specializing in custody cases. Her reviews mentioned aggressive defense and fighting for mothers' rights. I booked a consultation for the next morning. Sharon's office was in a professional building downtown, sterile and anonymous. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back severely and eyes that assessed me the moment I walked in. Miss Whitlock, tell me what's happening. I told her everything. The coaching session I'd overheard, the journal, the CPS visit, Michelle's subtle shift toward believing Darius, the Facebook post, the isolation, all of it. I spoke quickly, desperately, trying to make her understand. When I finished, Sharon leaned back in her chair. Do you have the journal? I photographed pages of it, but he keeps it hidden. I don't know if I can get it again. The photographs are a start. What about the coaching session? Did you record it? No. I didn't think to. I was just frozen. Sharon tapped her pen against her notepad. Miss Whitlock, I'm going to be very direct with you. You're behind. Significantly behind. Your husband has controlled the narrative from the beginning. He called CPS first, positioning himself as the concerned parent. He has the investigator's ear. He's building social proof through public support. Everything he's done has been strategic. I know. That's why I need help. What you need is evidence. Not your word against his. Not your interpretation of his journal, which a good attorney will say could be misunderstood or taken out of context. You need undeniable proof that he's coaching your daughter, manipulating the system, and lying to the investigator. How do I get that? You document everything. You record conversations if you're in a one-party consent state, are you? Yes. I checked. I started recording yesterday. Good. Keep doing that. Every interaction with him. Every conversation where he might slip up. You get medical records showing no history of injury or abuse. You gather character witnesses who can testify to your parenting. You find anyone else he might have done this to before ex-girlfriends, former partners. Patterns are powerful in court. I nodded, taking notes on my phone with shaking hands. But Miss Whitlock, I need you to understand something. Sharon's voice softened slightly. This is going to get worse before it gets better. If your husband is as calculating as you say, he will escalate when he realizes you're fighting back. He will file for emergency custody. He will paint you as unstable, possibly dangerous. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might lose temporary custody while the investigation proceeds. The words hit like physical blows. Lose custody. Temporary. Investigation. How long? Months. Maybe longer. These cases move slowly. I felt the room tilt. Months without Zara. Months of supervised visitation if I was lucky. No contact if I wasn't. Months of my daughter being coached to fear me. I can't lose her for months. She's 7 years old. She won't understand. Then we fight hard and we fight smart. But you need to accept that this is war. And your husband fired the first shots months ago. We're playing catch-up. I left Sharon's office with a retainer agreement, a list of tasks, and a sense of drowning. The legal fees alone would drain my savings. The emotional cost was incalculable. That night, after Darius fell asleep, I went to the garage. I'd memorized where he hid the journal behind the paint cans on the second shelf, tucked into a cardboard box labeled Holiday Decorations. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The pages were worse than I remembered. More detailed, more calculated. I photographed every page with my phone, making sure the lighting was clear, the text legible. Evidence. This was evidence. One entry, dated 3 weeks ago, made me stop breathing. E is too trusting. Doesn't suspect anything. The key is consistency. Everyone needs to hear the same story. Already have Michelle leaning my direction. The Facebook post next week will solidify public perception. By the time E realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to defend herself. Isolation is the most effective weapon. He'd written it plainly. The strategy, the manipulation, the cruelty. I took 12 photos of that page alone, from different angles, making sure every word was captured. Then I put the journal back exactly as I'd found it, rearranging the paint cans, checking twice that everything looked undisturbed. Back in bed, Darius slept peacefully beside me, one arm thrown over his head, breathing steady. He looked innocent in sleep, handsome. Nothing like the man who'd written those words. I lay awake until dawn, my phone clutched under my pillow, filled with evidence he didn't know I had. It was the first move I'd made that he hadn't anticipated. It wouldn't be enough. Not yet, but it was a start. The isolation he'd weaponized so carefully had one flaw. It made me invisible. And invisible people can gather proof no one sees coming. I started with the photos. Old pictures from Darius's Facebook, back before he'd scrubbed his profile of anything that didn't fit the narrative he was building now. I scrolled back 6 years, past our wedding photos, past the early dating pictures, to the ones from before we met. There she was in several shots, a woman with dark, curly hair and a wide smile, standing close to Darius at what looked like a barbecue. Another photo, the two of them at a charity run, his arm around her shoulders. The comments on those photos were sparse, mostly from people I didn't recognize, but one friend had tagged her. Great seeing you and Darius. Rebecca Morgan. Rebecca Morgan. I typed the name into Google with hands that had stopped shaking and started going numb. The search returned dozens of results, a common enough name. I added Chicago because that's where Darius had lived before moving here. Then I found her LinkedIn profile. Rebecca Morgan, MSW, clinical social worker specializing in family therapy, based in Chicago. The profile picture showed an older version of the woman from Darius's photos, same curly hair, now with some gray, same smile but with something harder behind the eyes, something that recognized pain. I stared at her profile for 20 minutes, composing and deleting messages. What do you say to your husband's ex-girlfriend? Did he destroy you too? Was he always a monster? Please tell me I'm not crazy. Finally, I settled on something simple. Miss Morgan, I know this is unusual, but my name is Ella Whitlock. I'm married to Darius Whitlock. I found your name in some old photos, and I need to ask you something important about him. If you're willing to talk, please call me. It's urgent. I added my phone number and hit send before I could second-guess myself. I didn't expect a response. Why would she reply to a stranger? To her ex's current wife? It had been 6 years. She'd moved on. She probably didn't want to revisit whatever had ended between them. My phone rang 47 minutes later. Unknown Chicago number. I answered on the second ring. Hello, is this Ella? A woman's voice, cautious but not cold. Yes. Rebecca? Yeah. A pause. You said it was urgent. What's going on with Darius? I didn't know how to start, so I just said it. He's trying to take my daughter. He called CPS with false accusations. He's been coaching her to say I hurt her, and I think he's been planning it for months. Silence on the other end. So long I thought she'd hung up. Then, oh God, he did it to me too. The words punched through me. Validation and horror in equal measure. What? I whispered. The exact same playbook. Rebecca's voice shook. I should have warned someone. I should have Jesus. I thought I was the only one. I thought maybe I'd driven him to it somehow. Tell me what happened, please. I heard her take a breath, steadying herself. We dated for 2 years. Darius was amazing at first. Everyone loved him, you know? Charismatic, involved in the community, passionate about justice. We moved in together after a year. His sister had a son, Jason, 8 years old at the time. Darius was really involved with Jason. Took him on weekends, coached his soccer team. She paused. I heard liquid pouring. A glass being set down. Fortification. About 6 months before we broke up, things started getting weird. Darius began documenting everything I did with Jason, taking photos if I gave him snacks before dinner, recording conversations where I'd correct Jason's behavior. At the time, I thought he was just being an overprotective uncle. But then Jason started acting different around me. Quieter. Nervous. My stomach tightened. What did Darius do? He coached him. I caught them once Darius was telling Jason to remember the time Rebecca got really mad at him. Except it never happened. When I confronted Darius, he said I was being paranoid, that I was under too much stress, that maybe I should talk to someone. The same words. The exact same words he'd used on me. Then Darius called his sister and told her he was concerned about my interactions with Jason, that he'd seen me grab Jason roughly, yell at him, things that never happened. His sister believed him instantly. They cut off my access to Jason completely. Darius tried to file a complaint with DCFS, claiming I'd been abusive during the times I'd watched Jason alone. What happened with the complaint? It went nowhere. Jason was 8 and smart enough that when he was interviewed, he got confused with the coached story. Kept saying, Uncle Darius said, before catching himself. The investigator saw through it, but the damage was done. Darius's family turned against me. Our mutual friends believed him. I looked crazy for accusing this devoted uncle of fabricating abuse claims. So you left. I ran. I broke up with him, moved back to Chicago, and spent a year in therapy trying to understand what had happened. My therapist called it coercive control, with a twist he was testing whether he could manipulate a child and a system. Practicing, she said, like he was perfecting a technique. The word hit me. Practicing. And then he moved on to someone else. To you, Rebecca said quietly. I'm so sorry. I should have said something, done something. How could you? Who would have believed you? That's the thing. He's so good at this, so calculated. He positions himself as the good guy, the protector, and makes you look unhinged for defending yourself. She exhaled shakily. Do you have evidence? Please tell me you have something concrete. I found his journal. He wrote out the whole strategy. And I've started recording conversations. That's good. That's really good. Listen, Ella. I kept everything from my case. Court documents, the DCFS report, even a statement from Jason's teacher who said she'd never witnessed any concerning behavior from me. I'll send it all to you. Your lawyer needs to show this is a pattern. You'd testify? Absolutely. I should have done something 6 years ago. I won't make that mistake again. We talked for another 40 minutes. Rebecca walked me through every manipulation tactic she'd experienced. The isolation, the gaslighting, the way Darius weaponized social justice language to make any criticism of him seem like bigotry. How he'd position himself as reasonable while making her seem emotional. How he'd used her love for Jason against her. It was like hearing my own story told by someone else. When we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand, shaking but not from fear this time, from recognition. This wasn't about me. This wasn't something I'd caused or failed to prevent. This was who Darius was. Systematic, practiced, calculated. I opened my laptop and started searching. Parental alienation tactics, false abuse accusations, custody, coercive control, manipulation, children. I found forums, support groups, message boards filled with parents, mostly mothers, describing impossible situations where their partners had turned their children into weapons. One forum, called Falsely Accused Parents, had hundreds of threads. I scrolled through, and 3 stories made me stop cold. The first was from a woman named Jennifer. My ex documented everything for 6 months before filing. He had a journal with dates, times, incidents that never happened. He coached our son to say I hit him. When I tried to defend myself, everyone said I was being paranoid. Has anyone else experienced this level of planning? The second was from Maria. He's black, I'm white, and he's using the racial dynamics to position himself as the protective father saving our daughter from me. Friends who I thought knew me better immediately sided with him. The investigator clearly trusted him more from the start. I feel like I'm fighting with one hand tied behind my back. The third was from Anonymous. Does anyone else's ex use social justice language to shut down any criticism? Mine calls me controlling if I question him, says I'm uncomfortable with his identity if I push back, makes everything about race when it's actually about manipulation. But I can't say that without sounding racist. I feel trapped. Each post had dozens of replies, other mothers sharing nearly identical experiences. The tactics varied slightly, but the pattern was the same. Systematic isolation, coached children, weaponized identity, careful documentation of fabricated incidents. And in the replies, I found more men's names, partners who'd done this before. One name appeared 3 times in different threads, mentioned by different women. Darius W. My breath caught. I clicked through the threads, reading carefully. The details were vague, the women protecting themselves and each other by using only initials, but the pattern was unmistakable. One woman mentioned Chicago. Another mentioned nonprofit work. A third described a charismatic personality that everyone trusted immediately. He'd done this before, not just with Rebecca, with others. This was who Darius was. Not a father driven to desperate measures by genuine concern. Not a husband pushed to the edge by a wife's instability. He was someone who found vulnerable relationships and systematically destroyed them, using children as tools. I created an account on the forum using a fake email, posted carefully. My husband has been planning false abuse accusations for months. I found his journal detailing the strategy. His ex-girlfriend confirmed he did the same thing to her with his nephew 6 years ago. Does anyone have advice on proving a pattern? Within an hour, I had 17 replies. Women offering support, legal advice, suggestions for documentation. 3 private messages from mothers who'd successfully fought similar cases. One from a woman who'd lost custody for 2 years before finally proving the truth. 2 years. The thought made me nauseous. But buried in the messages was something more valuable than advice. Contact information for other women who'd been involved with Darius. One woman, using the name Chicago Survivor, sent me a private message. I think we dated the same man. DM me if you want to compare notes. I spent the rest of the night reading case files Rebecca emailed, comparing stories from the forum, and building a timeline that stretched back a decade. Darius hadn't just practiced on Rebecca. He'd refined this technique across multiple relationships, multiple children. Each time, he'd positioned himself as the hero. Each time, he'd isolated the mother. Each time, he'd coached the child. And each time, he'd moved on when the manipulation failed or succeeded, leaving destruction in his wake. By dawn, I had statements from 3 women willing to testify. I had documentation of a pattern spanning 10 years. I had proof that this wasn't spontaneous concern, this was premeditated, systematic abuse of the family court system. Darius came downstairs at 6:30, already dressed for work, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. "Morning, babe. Sleep okay?" I looked at him, this man I'd married, this father I'd trusted with my daughter, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not the mask he wore, not the performance he gave, but the cold calculation underneath. "Fine," I said. "Coffee? That'd be great." He kissed my forehead, and I forced myself not to flinch. He had no idea I'd found his pattern. No idea Rebecca had called. No idea 3 other women were ready to expose him. He thought he was still invisible, still in control. He was wrong. I poured his coffee with steady hands, my phone recording in my pocket, and thought, "You practiced on them, but they're going to help me end you." The recording app sat on my phone's home screen now, no longer hidden in a folder marked Utilities. I'd checked the state law 3 times, consulted with Sharon, and confirmed it again with a legal aid website. Single-party consent. As long as I was part of the conversation, I could record it. Every word, every manipulation, every lie. It became a reflex. Before any interaction with Darius, my thumb would find the red button, press, record, evidence. The first useful recording came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd picked Zara up from school and brought her home for snack time. Darius arrived early from work, deliberately, I realized later. He wanted to catch a natural moment he could shape. "Hey, princess!" He scooped Zara up, spinning her around. She giggled, and the sound broke my heart because it was genuine. She still loved him, still trusted him completely. "How was school?" "Good. We learned about butterflies." "That's amazing. Hey, remember yesterday when Mommy got upset about your homework?" My hand froze on the apple I was slicing. Yesterday. Homework. There had been no upset, no incident. Zara had finished her math worksheet in 15 minutes while I made dinner. Zara's voice went uncertain. "I don't remember Mommy being upset." "Really? Think hard, baby. You were at the kitchen table, remember? And Mommy raised her voice because you weren't focusing." I watched through the kitchen doorway as Darius knelt down to Zara's level, hands on her shoulders. Gentle, patient, poisonous. "I was focusing, though," Zara said, confusion clear in her voice. "I finished all my problems." "Right. But before that, when you were taking a long time, Mommy got frustrated, didn't she?" I guess." It came out as a question. She was trying to remember something that hadn't happened, searching her memory for an event Darius was planting there. "It's okay to tell the truth, Zara, even if it makes Mommy look bad. I won't let anything happen to you." But Mommy didn't. Sometimes we forget things that make us uncomfortable. That's normal. But if someone asks you about yesterday's homework time, it's important to remember accurately. Mommy was frustrated. "You were taking too long." She raised her voice. "Can you remember that now?" Zara bit her lip. "Okay. Good girl. Let's practice. What happened during homework yesterday?" "Mommy got frustrated, and she raised her voice at me?" "Perfect. That's exactly what happened." I stood in the kitchen with my phone in my pocket, recording every word, feeling my daughter's memory being rewritten in real time. The apple slice in my hand had gone brown at the edges. I'd stopped breathing somewhere during Darius's coaching session. When he left to take a work call, I went to Zara. She was coloring at the dining table, humming to herself. "Hey, sweetie. What are you drawing?" "A butterfly, like the ones from school." She held it up, bright wings, smiling face, utterly innocent. "It's beautiful. Hey, can I ask you something? About homework yesterday?" Her crayon paused. "What about it? Do you remember me getting upset with you?" She looked down at her paper. "Daddy said I should remember it. But do you remember it? Actually remember it happening?" A long pause. Then, quietly, "Not really. But Daddy says I need to remember things right." I pulled her into my lap, holding her tight enough that she squirmed. "Baby, you don't have to remember things that didn't happen, okay? It's never wrong to tell the truth about what really occurred." But what if I forget what really occurred? Then you say I don't remember instead of making something up. That's what honest people do. She nodded against my chest, but I could feel the confusion in her small body. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her father is teaching her to lie without destroying her world? That recording went into a folder I'd labeled Evidence Timeline. I noted the date, time, and content. Then I added it to the spreadsheet Sharon had told me to keep. A meticulous log of every interaction, every coached conversation, every manufactured memory. The next day, I called Zara's pediatrician. Dr. Sarah Chen had been seeing Zara since she was 2 years old. Every checkup, every illness, every scraped knee. Dr. Chen, I need a favor. I'm involved in a custody situation, and I need Zara's complete medical history. Every visit, every documented injury, every concern ever noted. There was a pause. Ella, is everything okay? No, but it will be. Can you provide those records? Of course. I'll have them ready this afternoon. The records arrived as a 40-page PDF. I read through every entry, every examination note, every growth chart. 5 years of documented medical care. Not a single unexplained bruise. Not one fractured bone. No burns, no marks, no visits that suggested anything other than normal childhood bumps and scrapes, all with clear explanations. Fell off bike, tripped at playground, bumped into table corner. Dr. Chen had noted, well cared for child, in multiple entries, appropriate parental attention to minor injuries, mother attentive and responsive to health concerns. I added the medical records to my evidence file and sent a copy to Sharon. Zara's school was next. I scheduled a meeting with her counselor, Miss Patricia Williams, under the guise of checking in about Zara's adjustment to 2nd grade. She's doing wonderfully academically, Miss Williams said, pulling out a folder. Her reading scores are above grade level, and she's very social with her peers. Has she seemed different lately? In any way? Miss Williams hesitated. Actually, yes. I was going to reach out to you about it. Her artwork has changed quite a bit in the last few months. She laid out a series of drawings, dated chronologically, September through November. Bright colors, happy families, houses with gardens, cats and dogs and sunshine. Standard 7-year-old optimism. December through February. Darker. Figures separated by space. A house with a door that looked like a mouth. One drawing showed 3 people, 2 large, one small with the small figure standing alone while the others stood close together. When did you first notice the change? I asked. Miss Williams checked her notes. Mid-December, around the 15th. The drawings became more subdued, and she started being quieter during free choice time. December 15th. I checked Darius's journal entries on my phone. December 14th. Timeline initiated. Begin documentation phase. The correlation was exact. Has she said anything about why her drawings changed? Once. I asked her about this one. She pointed to a picture of a girl with a single tear. She said she was drawing a game her daddy taught her. I asked what game, and she said, the remembering game. Then she got quiet and wouldn't say more. The remembering game. Practicing memories that didn't exist. Miss Williams, I'm going to need these drawings. Copies with dates. It's for a legal matter. She looked at me carefully. Is Zara safe? She will be. Once I can prove what's happening. Miss Williams made copies of every drawing from the school year, organizing them chronologically. The visual timeline of Zara's psychological manipulation, documented in crayon and marker. Sharon had recommended I get Zara into play therapy both for her well-being and for documentation. I found a child psychologist, Dr. Michael Torres, who specialized in family transitions and had experience with custody cases. After 3 sessions, Dr. Torres called me in for a consultation. Ella, I need to share some concerns. Not about abuse. I see no indicators of physical harm. But Zara is exhibiting signs of coaching. What kind of signs? She uses specific phrases that don't sound like a child's natural language. Mommy gets frustrated easily. Sometimes I feel scared. But when I ask her to describe a specific incident, she becomes vague. The language is there, but the actual memories aren't. What else? She refers to something she calls Daddy's game. When I asked her to explain it, she said it's about remembering things the right way. That Daddy helps her remember correctly when she forgets. Doctor. Torres leaned forward. Ella, children don't naturally forget their own experiences and need help remembering them. That's not how memory works. That's external construction. Can you document that? For court? I can and will. I'm already taking detailed session notes. If this goes to trial, I can testify about coaching indicators. I left his office with another piece of evidence. Professional observation from a child psychologist with no bias, no agenda, just clinical assessment of what was happening to my daughter. At home, I created the timeline Sharon had requested. A spreadsheet with 4 columns. Date, Darius's claimed incident, actual events, evidence, February 3rd. Ella grabbed Zara roughly during bedtime routine. I was at a work dinner until 9 p.m. Darius did bedtime. Restaurant receipt. Text messages with colleagues. Photo time-stamped at dinner. February 10th. Ella yelled at Zara for spilling juice. Child was visibly frightened. No juice was spilled. We had smoothies at breakfast. Normal morning. Ring doorbell camera footage showing calm breakfast routine. February 15th. Ella refused to let Zara eat dinner as punishment. Zara ate full meal. Seconds of pasta. Photo I'd taken for my food blog, showing Zara's empty plate. Every incident Darius had reported, I had documented evidence disproving. Receipts, photos, text messages, GPS data from my phone. The timeline ran 6 pages. Not a single accusation matched reality. Then I requested our bank records. Sharon had suggested this, and I understood why the moment I saw them. December 12th. Amazon purchase. $47.98. The High Conflict Co-Parent. A Psychologist's Guide to Winning Custody Battles. December 18th. Google search ad click-through charge, $0. Search term captured. How to prove parental alienation. January 5th. Legal consultation fee, $250. Attorney specializing in father's rights custody cases. January 9th. Amazon purchase. $23.99. Stage makeup basics. Creating realistic bruises. January 14th. Online course, $199. Documenting parental misconduct for court. The purchases told their own story. A paper trail of premeditation, Darius researching, planning, buying tools for the exact manipulation he was executing. I added the bank records to my evidence file, highlighting each relevant purchase. By the end of the week, I had assembled what Sharon called a compelling evidentiary package. 17 audio recordings of Darius coaching Zara or discussing his strategy. Complete medical records showing 0 history of abuse. Chronological timeline of Zara's artwork showing dramatic shift. Child psychologist's notes documenting coaching indicators. 6-page incident timeline with alibis for every accusation. Bank records showing premeditated research and purchases. Statements from Rebecca and 2 other women documenting pattern. Photographs of Darius's journal entries detailing his plan. I sat at my kitchen table at midnight, my laptop open to the organized evidence folder, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Not the power of anger or desperation. The power of truth, documented so thoroughly that performance couldn't defeat it. Darius had been systematic in his destruction, so I would be systematic in my defense. He'd built his case on lies that sounded plausible. I'd build mine on evidence that couldn't be argued away. He'd weaponized our daughter. I would protect her with facts. My phone buzzed. A text from Sharon. How's the documentation coming? I attached the evidence folder. Now 247 files organized in labeled subfolders and typed, "I'm ready." Her response came immediately. "Good. Because he's about to escalate. They always do when they sense they're losing control." I looked at my phone, at the recording app sitting ready on my home screen, at the evidence I'd gathered with shaking hands and sleepless nights. Let him escalate. Every move he made now, I'd document. Every lie he told, I'd disprove. Every manipulation he attempted, I'd capture. He'd thought he was invisible in his planning, but I'd become invisible in my evidence gathering. And when the time came, when we stood before a judge and he performed his concerned father routine, I wouldn't fight him with emotion or explanations. I'd fight him with facts he couldn't perform away. The kitchen light cast long shadows across my evidence spreadsheet. Upstairs, Zara slept peacefully, unaware that her mother was building a case that would either save her or fail her. I wouldn't fail. I couldn't. I saved the files, backed them up to 3 separate locations, and sent copies to Sharon's secure server. Then I went upstairs and stood in Zara's doorway, watching her breathe in the darkness. "I'm going to fix this," I whispered. "With evidence you'll understand someday when you read through all of this. Evidence that will show you how hard I fought, how much I loved you, how I refused to let his performance become your reality." She stirred in her sleep, clutching her stuffed elephant closer. I closed her door softly and went to face whatever Darius would throw at me next. This time, I was ready. I made a mistake on Thursday night. A small one. The kind that costs everything. I'd been recording Darius's conversation with Zara in the living room, another coaching session disguised as homework help. My phone was in my pocket as always, but I'd also placed a backup recorder in the bookshelf, hidden behind a row of novels. "Belt and suspenders," Sharon had said. "Redundancy is your friend." After Darius went upstairs to shower, I retrieved the small device no bigger than a USB drive and slipped it into my pocket. Except I missed. It fell onto the couch cushion, lodged between the armrest and the seat. I didn't notice until I was already in the kitchen, starting dishes. "I'll get it after he goes to bed," I thought. He never checks the couch cushions. At 10:17 p.m., I heard Darius's voice from the living room. "Ella, come here." The tone made my stomach drop. Not angry, not yet, but cold, flat. The voice of someone who'd just found exactly what they'd been looking for. I dried my hands and walked to the living room. Darius stood by the couch, holding the small SD card recorder between his thumb and forefinger like it was a dead insect. "What's this?" he asked quietly. My mind raced through possible explanations. Work device. Old recorder from college. Found it in a drawer and was checking if it still worked. Every lie tasted wrong before I could speak it. "It's a recorder," I said. "I can see that. Still quiet. Still cold. What's it doing in our couch?" "I've been documenting our conversations." The mask cracked. Not slowly, instantly, like he'd been holding it in place with tension that suddenly released. His face transformed into something I'd never fully seen before. Rage, but controlled. Precise. More terrifying than screaming. "You've been recording me." "Not a question. A statement loaded with implications." "Recording us. It's legal. Single-party consent state." He laughed, a sound without humor. "You think that matters? You think legality is the issue here?" He took a step closer. I held my ground, barely. "You've been surveilling your own family. Secretly recording your husband, probably recording our daughter. Do you understand how that looks? It looks like I'm protecting myself." "No." Another step. "It looks like paranoia. It looks like a woman so unstable, so convinced of some conspiracy, that she's secretly recording everyone around her. What judge is going to give custody to someone doing that? A judge who listens to what you've been coaching Zara to say." His eyes narrowed. "Coaching? You mean parenting? You mean helping my daughter process her legitimate fears about her mother's behavior? I mean manipulating a 7-year-old to lie about abuse that never happened." "See, that right there. He pointed at me, and something in the gesture was threatening despite the space between us. That's the paranoia. That's the instability. I'm concerned about our daughter, trying to help her feel safe. And you've constructed this elaborate fiction where I'm some kind of mastermind villain. He held up the recorder. This proves it. You're not well, Ella. Give me the recorder. No. This is evidence now. Evidence of your surveillance, your paranoia, your inability to see reality clearly. My phone was still in my pocket, still recording. I had backups of everything on that SD card, but he didn't need to know that. You can't use that in court. You found it through an illegal search. Illegal search? He laughed again. I was sitting on my own couch in my own home. I found a recording device hidden in the cushions. That's not illegal search. That's discovery of surveillance equipment. And you know what? I'm calling my attorney first thing tomorrow. He turned and walked toward his office, taking the recorder with him. I stood in the living room, calculating. The recordings on that card were backed up. I had copies, but Darius now knew I was documenting everything, which meant he'd adjust his strategy. No more coaching sessions where I could overhear. No more unguarded moments. I'd lost my invisibility. The emergency custody motion arrived via email at 7:43 a.m. I was making Zara's breakfast when my phone lit up with the notification from the court. I opened the PDF with hands that had started shaking again. Emergency motion for temporary custody modification, the header read. I skimmed through the legal language to the substance. Respondent has been engaging in obsessive surveillance of petitioner and the minor child, including secret audio recordings and photographic documentation. This behavior indicates severe paranoia and possible mental health crisis. Respondent has made wild accusations against petitioner, claiming he is coaching the child and manufacturing abuse claims, despite no evidence supporting such conspiracy theories. Respondent's increasingly erratic behavior poses a risk to the minor child's emotional well-being. Petitioner requests immediate modification of custody to supervised visitation, only for respondent, pending full psychological evaluation. Attached were exhibits, a photo of the recorder, a transcript of me confronting him about the coaching edited to remove his admissions, making me sound unhinged. Screenshots of my online forum posts about parental alienation, framed as evidence of obsessive conspiracy thinking. He'd spun everything. The documentation that was supposed to protect me had become proof of my instability. I called Sharon at 7:58 a.m. He found one of my recorders, I said without preamble. Filed emergency motion. He's calling me paranoid. Do you still have the recordings? Backed up in 3 places. He only got 1 SD card. Good. Send me everything immediately. And Ella? Don't panic. This is exactly what I said would happen, escalation. He's scared because he knows you have evidence. He's trying to discredit it preemptively. The hearing is tomorrow. Emergency order. I know. We'll be ready. But we weren't ready for the judge's initial ruling. At 4:17 p.m., the temporary order came through. Pending full hearing, respondent's visitation with minor child shall be supervised by court-approved supervisor, minimum 2 hours per week, until psychological evaluation is completed. Supervised visitation, 2 hours per week. With Zara thinking I was the problem, I had to tell her. I picked her up from school Friday afternoon, my last unsupervised pickup. She bounced into the car, backpack dragging, talking about a class project on planets. And I picked Saturn because of the rings. And Marcus picked Jupiter, but that's boring because everyone picks Jupiter. Zara, sweetie, I need to talk to you about something. She stopped mid-sentence, reading my tone. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly, but things are going to be different for a little while. When I see you next week, there will be another grown-up there with us. Someone who helps make sure visits go well. Her face scrunched in confusion. Why? Because Daddy and I are having some grown-up disagreements about how to handle things, and a judge decided this would be best while we figure it out. Did I do something wrong? The question broke me. No, baby. You did nothing wrong. This isn't about you. But is it the game? Did I mess up Daddy's game? I pulled over, unable to drive safely through sudden tears. What do you mean? Daddy's game? She picked at her seatbelt, not meeting my eyes. The remembering game, where I have to remember things right. Daddy's been mad lately. His voice gets different. He asked if I told you about the game, and I said, maybe I did by accident. And he got really quiet. She looked up at me, eyes wide and scared. Is that why you have to have the other grown-up there? Because I told? I unbuckled and climbed into the back seat beside her, pulling her into my lap despite the awkward angle. She was getting too big for this, all long legs and elbows, but she curled into me like she was small again. Zara, listen to me very carefully. You did not do anything wrong. The remembering game, that's not a real game, baby. It's Daddy trying to get you to say things that didn't happen. But he said I was helping him protect me. I know he said that. But sweetie, you don't need protection from me. I have never hurt you, and I never would. Do you understand that? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a very small voice, I get confused sometimes about what really happened and what Daddy says happened. They feel different in my head. The one that feels real, that's what really happened. The one Daddy tells you to remember, that's not real. But why would Daddy want me to remember things that aren't real? How do you explain manipulation to a 7-year-old? How do you tell her that her father is using her as a weapon without destroying her ability to trust anyone ever again? Sometimes grown-ups make really bad choices, I said carefully. Even grown-ups who love us. Daddy is making a bad choice right now, and I'm trying to fix it. But I need you to know that none of this is your fault. You didn't fail at any game. You're not in trouble. And I'm going to keep loving you exactly the same, even if we can't see each other as much for a little while. She cried then, not the coached tears Darius had taught her, but real 7-year-old sobbing. I don't want a supervisor. I want things to be normal. I know. Me too. Is Daddy going to be mad that I told you about the game? And there it was, the fear he'd planted so deep she couldn't see around it. She was more afraid of disappointing Darius than of any harm from me. She'd been conditioned to protect him, to play along, to be his ally in my destruction. You don't have to worry about Daddy being mad, I said, though I knew she would anyway. You worry about being honest and safe, that's all. I drove her home to the house that was still technically ours, but felt like his territory now. Darius opened the door before we reached it, smile fixed in place. Hey, princess, how was school? Zara looked between us, uncertain. Good. Go get washed up for dinner. He waited until she was inside, then turned to me. The smile vanished. You told her about the supervised visitation. She had a right to know before it happened. You had no right to frame it as my fault. No right to poison her against me. I told her the truth. Your version of it. He stepped closer, voice dropping so Zara couldn't hear. You think you can win this? You think your recordings and your conspiracy theories are going to convince anyone? You've already lost, Ella. The judge thinks you're unstable. Your friends think you're paranoid. Even your own mother doubts you. He smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. I've won. I just need to wait for you to finish destroying yourself. I met his eyes and didn't look away. You forgot something. What's that? I still have all the recordings. Every coached session, every manufactured memory, every word of your journal. And you have no idea how much evidence I've actually gathered because you only found one device. His smile faltered, just for a second. See you at the hearing, I said, and walked back to my car. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark of my apartment. I'd moved out 3 days ago. Another thing Darius would use against me, abandoning the family home. And thought about Zara's question. Did I do the game wrong? She thought she'd failed him. She thought this was her fault. She'd been so thoroughly manipulated that she'd internalized her role in her own victimization. The protective fury that rose in me then was different from fear. different from desperation. It was clear and cold and absolutely certain. Darius had hurt my daughter. Not with hands, but with words. Not with violence, but with psychological warfare. He'd twisted her reality until she couldn't tell truth from fiction, until she blamed herself for his manipulation. And he'd done it all while wearing the mask of a loving father. Tomorrow, I'd sit across from him in court. He'd perform concern and devotion. He'd paint me as unstable. He'd use my documentation against me, calling it paranoia instead of protection. But I had something he didn't expect. I had the pattern. I had Rebecca. I had 3 other women. I had evidence that this was who he was, not what I'd driven him to. And I had my daughter's whispered confession recorded on my phone from the car, asking if she'd done the game wrong. Out of the mouths of babes comes truth that adults spend years trying to obscure. Let him perform tomorrow. I'd let the evidence speak. Sharon's office at 8 a.m. Monday morning felt like a war room. Evidence folders spread across the conference table. Her paralegal organizing exhibits by category. A timeline printed on poster board showing the progression of Darius's manipulation from December to now. 3 months compressed into visual proof. We have 2 goals today, Sharon said, tapping her pen against the table. First, discredit his emergency motion by showing the recordings aren't paranoia, they're documentation of real abuse. Second, establish pattern through Rebecca's testimony and the other women's statements. If we do this right, the judge won't just deny his motion. She'll see him clearly for the first time. I nodded, hands wrapped around coffee I couldn't drink. My stomach had been in knots since 4 a.m. The key is letting his performance collapse under its own weight. He'll testify first, he requested it. He'll be charming, concerned, the devoted father worried about his unstable wife. We don't interrupt. We let him commit to his story. Sharon looked at me seriously. Then we play the recordings. Not all of them, just 3. The coaching session where he teaches Zara to remember homework that didn't happen. The one where he explicitly says, think about when your goldfish died. That's the face we need. And the car recording where Zara asks if she did the game wrong. Will the judge allow them? He's arguing. I was surveilling illegally. Single-party consent state. You were part of every conversation. It's admissible. His attorney will object, but it won't stick. She slid a document across the table. This is the subpoena response from his therapist. I read through it quickly. Dr. Patricia Morrison, LMFT, had been seeing Darius weekly since January. Her notes, heavily redacted for privacy, included phrases that made my blood run cold. Client expresses concern about spouse's mental state. Describes incidents of aggression toward child. Worried about daughter's safety but conflicted about reporting. Notes spouse's increasing paranoia and defensiveness when questioned. He's been building the narrative with his therapist too, I said quietly. Which actually helps us. When we play the recordings, Dr. Morrison will realize she's been manipulated. She'll understand her client lied to her for months, used her professional notes as cover. Therapists don't like being weaponized. Will she testify? If we need her, yes. But I think the recordings will be enough. Sharon pulled out another folder. Doctor, Torres's report arrived this morning. His assessment of Zara's therapy sessions. I opened it with shaking hands. The clinical language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out. Child demonstrates clear indicators of coached testimony. Uses adult phrasing inconsistent with developmental stage. References games involving memory and performance. Exhibits confusion between actual events and instructed narratives. Shows anxiety about getting stories right rather than reporting genuine experiences. Dr. Torres had attached transcripts from 3 sessions. In one, Zara had said, I need to remember to be sad about the right things. In another, Daddy helps me practice my scared face in the mirror. In the third, when Torres asked her to draw a picture of her family. She'd drawn 3 figures, and then started erasing the middle one, saying, "I'm not sure if I go there or there. Daddy keeps changing where I stand." "This is damning," I whispered. "It's clinical proof of psychological abuse. Dr. Torres will testify that Zara is being actively harmed by the coaching, that her ability to distinguish reality from instruction is being compromised. That's not a custody dispute, that's child abuse." We spent 2 hours reviewing strategy, anticipating Darius's attorney's arguments, preparing responses. By 10 a.m., I felt as ready as I could be for a battle I still might lose. "One more thing," Sharon said as I was gathering my coat. "Rebecca's flying in this afternoon. She asked if you'd meet her for coffee before the hearing tomorrow." Rebecca, the woman who'd survived this exact pattern 6 years ago, who'd reached out within an hour of my first message. Who was flying across the country to testify against a man who'd destroyed part of her life? "Text me the details," I said. "I'll be there." We met at a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse. I recognized her from her LinkedIn photo. Curly hair now with gray streaks, kind eyes that held hard-earned wariness. She stood when I entered, and we hugged like old friends, though we'd never met in person. "Thank you for coming," I said as we sat. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "I've spent 6 years thinking I was alone in what happened, that maybe I had misunderstood, or overreacted, or somehow caused it. And then you messaged me, and I realized, he did it again. He'll keep doing it until someone stops him. I'm trying to stop him." "You're not just trying. You're succeeding. You have evidence I never got. You documented everything I should have documented." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I lost my case because it was my word against his, and he's so good at performing reason. But you won't lose, because you have proof." We talked for 2 hours. She walked me through her testimony, the questions Sharon would ask, the cross-examination she expected from Darius's attorney. She described what it felt like to watch him perform in court, the sincere concern, the reluctant sadness, the perfect mask. "Don't let it shake you," she said. "When he's testifying and you feel like the judge is believing him, remember, you have recordings. You have his journal. You have the pattern. Performance doesn't defeat evidence." Before we left, she said something that stayed with me. 6 years ago, I walked away broken, thinking I'd never be believed. Tomorrow, I get to stand up in court and say, "This man lied to me, manipulated me, and used a child as a weapon. And someone will finally believe me because you gathered the proof I couldn't. Thank you for that." I cried in the coffee shop bathroom for 10 minutes after she left. Back at my apartment, I found an email from Sharon. "Darius's therapist wants to testify." She reviewed the recordings. She's furious. Dr. Morrison's amended statement was brief and devastating. "Having reviewed the evidence provided by opposing counsel, I must revise my previous assessment. My client has been using our therapeutic relationship to create documentation of false concerns. The recordings clearly show behaviors he denied in session. I can no longer ethically support his claims regarding his spouse's parenting. I believe I have been instrumentalized in a pattern of manipulation." A therapist admitting she'd been deceived. Another brick in the wall of evidence. That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table with a blank journal and a pen. The hearing was in 14 hours. Whatever happened tomorrow, Zara would need to understand someday. Would need to know I'd fought for her, documented for her, loved her through every moment of this nightmare. I wrote for 3 hours, filling page after page. "Dear Zara, you're 7 years old right now, sleeping at Daddy's house, probably clutching your elephant. Someday you'll be old enough to read this and understand what happened during these months." I wrote about the coaching I'd witnessed, the journal I'd found, the pattern that emerged. I wrote about Rebecca and the other women. I wrote about every recording, every piece of evidence, every moment where I'd chosen documentation over emotion. I'm writing this because you might not believe me tomorrow, or next week, or next year. Daddy has taught you to doubt your own memories, to trust his version instead of your own. But someday, when you're old enough to see clearly, you'll read this letter and know. I saw the truth. I fought for the truth. And I never stopped loving you. Even when you were confused about whether to love me back. I sealed the letter in an envelope marked, "For Zara, age 16, and locked it in my filing cabinet with all the evidence. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Text from Darius. "Last chance. Drop this. You'll lose her either way." I read it twice, feeling the threat underneath the words. The attempt to make me believe he'd already won. The psychological warfare that had worked for months. Then I screenshot the text, noted the timestamp, and added it to the evidence file labeled Threats and Coercion. I typed back, "See you in court." His response came immediately. "You're making a mistake. The judge already thinks you're unstable. This will only make it worse. Think about Zara." Screenshot. Add to file. No response. Another text. "I'm trying to help you, Ella. Drop the emergency motion and we can work this out reasonably. Keep pushing and I'll have no choice but to pursue full custody." Screenshot. File. Silent. "Fine. You've made your choice." I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment, surrounded by evidence folders and legal documents and the weight of tomorrow. Rebecca's words echoed. "Performance doesn't defeat evidence." Sharon's strategy was clear. Let him perform, then dismantle it with fact. Dr. Torres had identified the coaching clinically. Dr. Morrison had admitted being manipulated. The pediatrician had documented years of normal care. The school counselor had tracked the timeline perfectly. 3 other women were ready to show the pattern. And I had 17 recordings of Darius, in his own words, coaching our daughter to lie. I thought about Zara's question in the car. Did I do the game wrong? Tomorrow, I would answer that question. Not to her directly, she was too young, too confused, too conditioned. But to the judge, to the system, to anyone who would listen. There was no game. There was only a father using his daughter as a weapon, and a mother who refused to let that weapon destroy them both. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and lay down, not expecting sleep, but finding it anyway. Deep, dreamless sleep that came from knowing I'd done everything possible to protect my child. Tomorrow, the evidence would speak, and Darius's perfect performance would finally, irreversibly, shatter. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Institutional beige walls, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look tired, wooden benches that reminded me of church pews. Judge Linda Richardson presided from the bench, mid-50s, reading glasses perched on her nose, expression carefully neutral as she reviewed the file. Darius sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, Marcus Webb, a man in an expensive suit who specialized in father's rights cases. Darius wore a navy sweater over a collared shirt, approachable, concerned, the picture of a worried father. He didn't look at me as I entered with Sharon. "All rise," the bailiff said, though we were already standing. Judge Richardson looked up. "We're here on an emergency motion for modification of custody. Mr. Webb, your client requested expedited hearing. Please proceed." Marcus Webb stood, smoothing his tie. "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll be brief. My client, Darius Whitlock, is a devoted father facing an impossible situation. His wife has become increasingly unstable, engaging in surveillance, making wild accusations, and creating a toxic environment for their 7-year-old daughter." He called Darius to the stand. Darius walked to the witness box with his shoulders slightly hunched, like the weight of this situation pressed on him. He was sworn in, sat down, and looked at his attorney with tired, pained eyes. "Mr. Whitlock, can you describe your relationship with your daughter Zara?" "She's my everything." His voice caught slightly, not overdone, just enough to seem genuine. "I've been in her life since she was 4 years old. Helped raise her, coached her soccer, tucked her in every night. She calls me Dad." "And your relationship with your wife, Ella?" A long pause. filled with visible reluctance. I love her. Or I did. I don't know anymore. Over the last few months, she's changed. Become paranoid, suspicious. She started accusing me of terrible things, manipulating Zara, coaching her to lie. None of it's true, but she believes it absolutely. What prompted you to call CPS? Darius's eyes filled with tears, real-looking, perfectly timed. I saw bruises on Zara. When I asked about them, she got scared. Said Mommy grabbed her too hard. I didn't want to believe it. I made excuses at first. But then Ella started getting more aggressive with Zara, yelling more, and I realized I had to protect my daughter even if it meant destroying my marriage. And when you discovered your wife was secretly recording you, I was horrified. He shook his head. She'd hidden devices around our house, been recording private conversations, documenting everything like we were criminals. That's not normal behavior. That's someone in a crisis who needs help. Marcus Webb walked him through more testimony-specific incidents where I'd allegedly grabbed Zara, yelled at her, behaved erratically. Each story was delivered with reluctant sadness, like he hated having to say these things, but truth demanded it. Judge Richardson took notes, her face unreadable. Your witness, Webb said to Sharon. Sharon stood but didn't approach immediately. Actually, Your Honor, we'll reserve cross-examination until after we present our evidence. I think the court will find Mr. Whitlock's testimony, cried, illuminating in retrospect. Judge Richardson raised an eyebrow but nodded. Very well. Miss Martinez, call your first witness. We'd like to present documentary evidence first, Your Honor. With the court's permission. Sharon pulled out the first recording. This is an audio file dated February 18th, recorded legally under single-party consent laws. Miss Whitlock was present in the home during this conversation between Mr. Whitlock and the minor child. She played it. The courtroom filled with Darius's voice, patient and coaching. Remember yesterday when Mommy got upset about your homework? Think hard, baby. You were at the kitchen table. Mommy raised her voice because you weren't focusing. Sometimes we forget things that make us uncomfortable. But if someone asks you about yesterday's homework time, it's important to remember accurately. Mommy was frustrated. You were taking too long. She raised her voice. Can you remember that now? Zara's small voice. Okay, good girl. Let's practice. What happened during homework yesterday? Mommy, got frustrated? She raised her voice at me. Perfect. That's exactly what happened. The recording ended. Silence in the courtroom. Judge Richardson looked at Darius. His face had gone carefully blank, but I saw his jaw tighten. Your Honor, Sharon continued, Miss Whitlock's calendar and Ring doorbell footage shows that on February 17th, the date Mr. Whitlock references in this coaching session, there was no homework struggle. Zara completed her math worksheet in 15 minutes, while Miss Whitlock prepared dinner. The entire interaction was calm and recorded on their home security system. Mr. Whitlock is coaching his daughter to remember an event that never occurred. She played 2 more recordings, the scared face practice session, and Zara in the car asking if she'd done the game wrong. Darius's attorney stood. Your Honor, these recordings are taken out of context. They don't show. I'll hear your objection during cross-examination, Mr. Webb. Continue, Miss Martinez. Sharon placed photographs on the projector pages from Darius's journal, clearly showing his handwriting. This is Mr. Whitlock's planning journal, found by Miss Whitlock in their garage. I'll read key excerpts. Timeline started January 14th. Document everything. Ella's stress, her short temper even when there isn't one, create the narrative. Public perception matters. White woman, black father use it. People want to believe the protective black father. Zara's confusion reads as fear on camera. Practice the phrases with her. Make it natural. Judge Richardson's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a subtle hardening around the eyes. Sharon continued through more entries, each one more damning than the last. The tutorial on creating realistic bruises. The recordings of Zara's voice played over until coached phrases sounded natural. The circled date for the CPS call. Your Honor, I'd like to call Rebecca Morgan to the stand. Rebecca walked to the witness box with her head high. She was sworn in and sat down, meeting Darius's eyes directly. He looked away first. Miss Morgan, how do you know Darius Whitlock? I dated him for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. And did Mr. Whitlock have contact with children during your relationship? Yes. His nephew, Jason, 8 years old at the time. Darius was very involved with him. Can you describe what happened toward the end of your relationship? Rebecca's voice stayed steady. Darius began accusing me of abusing Jason. He coached Jason to say I'd grabbed him roughly, yelled at him, things that never happened. He called DCFS with false reports. When the investigation found no evidence, our relationship ended. I later learned from Jason's teacher that Darius had been practicing concerned stories with Jason for months. Do you have documentation of these events? Yes. The DCFS investigation report, court documents from when Darius tried to get a protective order against me, and a statement from Jason's teacher noting the coaching. Sharon entered them into evidence. Darius's attorney was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this is prejudicial. Whatever happened in a previous relationship, it establishes pattern, Sharon countered. Same tactics, same coaching language, same false accusations. This isn't a one-time custody dispute. This is who Mr. Whitlock is. Judge Richardson studied the documents. I'll allow it. Pattern evidence is relevant to credibility. Sharon called Dr. Torres next. He testified clinically about the coaching indicators in Zara's play therapy, the confusion between actual memories and instructed narratives, the anxiety about getting stories right. In your professional opinion, Dr. Torres, is this child being harmed? Yes, she's being psychologically abused. Her father is systematically destroying her ability to trust her own perceptions. That's profound harm that will affect her for years. Then came Dr. Morrison, Darius's own therapist, looking deeply uncomfortable. Dr. Morrison, Mr. Whitlock has been your client since January. What did he tell you about his wife? He described her as increasingly unstable, aggressive with their daughter, paranoid about his parenting. He expressed deep concern and conflict about whether to report suspected abuse. Having reviewed the evidence presented today, the recordings, the journal entries, the pattern, do you still believe Mr. Whitlock's characterization of his wife? Dr. Morrison's voice was tight. No. I believe my client deliberately misled me to create documentation supporting false claims. I've been instrumentalized in a pattern of manipulation. I can no longer ethically support his petition. Sharon entered the pediatric records showing 5 years of normal care with no concerning injuries. The bank records showing researched custody manipulation strategies and stage makeup purchases. The timeline showing Darius's accusations paired with Ella's documented alibis for each claimed incident. Then Sharon said, Your Honor, I'd like to cross-examine Mr. Whitlock now. Darius returned to the stand. His composure was cracking at the edges, jaw too tight, hands gripping the armrests. Sharon didn't ease into it. Mr. Whitlock, you testified that you saw bruises on Zara that prompted your CPS call. What date was that? February 10th. And where specifically were these bruises? Her upper arm, like someone had grabbed her. Sharon pulled up Zara's pediatric visit from February 12th, 2 days after the alleged bruising. Dr. Chen's notes from this visit, which was for a routine checkup, note no bruises, marks, or concerning injuries of any kind. Were you mistaken about the bruises? They must have faded by then. Bruises significant enough to prompt a CPS call fade completely in 2 days? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But you researched how to create realistic-looking bruises with makeup. We have the purchase record from January 9th. His face flushed. That was I was helping with a school play. Zara's school had no play in January. I confirmed with her teacher. He had no response. Sharon walked through each accusation methodically. The homework incident that never happened, The dinner punishment when Zara actually ate seconds, the grocery store tantrum when they were demonstrably at home. Every story Darius had told collapsed when paired with evidence. Under the relentless precision of fact, his performance disintegrated. He started contradicting himself, getting dates wrong, confusing which incident he'd reported to whom. Judge Richardson watched it happen, her expression hardening with each failed explanation. "Mr. Whitlock," Sharon said quietly, "you wrote in your journal that you were creating a narrative. That isolation is the most effective weapon. That by the time E realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Did you write those words?" Silence. "The handwriting has been authenticated. Did you write them?" He looked at his attorney, who had no help to offer. "I was processing my feelings. It wasn't literal. You documented a plan to destroy your wife's credibility and isolate her from support. You coached your daughter to lie about abuse. You weaponized your therapist, the CPS system, and your own child. And you did it systematically, over months, with clear premeditation. Is that correct?" "No. You're twisting everything. I'm reading your own words, Mr. Whitlock." Judge Richardson spoke for the first time in an hour. "I've heard enough, Mr. Webb. Does your client have any explanation for the journal entries, the recordings, or the pattern evidence from Miss Morgan?" Marcus Webb stood slowly. He looked at Darius, then back at the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to consult with our client." "Denied. Answer the question." Webb sat down. "No, Your Honor. No explanation at this time." Judge Richardson removed her glasses and looked directly at Darius. "Mr. Whitlock, I've presided over custody cases for 15 years. I've seen genuine concern and I've seen manipulation. What you've done here is among the most calculated, cruel attempts to alienate a child from a parent I've ever witnessed. You haven't just lied to this court. You've psychologically abused your daughter and weaponized her against her mother." She looked down at her notes. "The emergency motion is denied. Custody remains with Miss Whitlock. Mr. Whitlock's visitation will be supervised pending completion of a full psychological evaluation and parenting classes focused on the harm of parental alienation. This court also orders immediate reunification therapy for Zara with Dr. Torres to address the coaching trauma." Darius's face went white. "Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the prosecutor's office for potential charges of filing a false report and child endangerment. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. Darius stood shakily and walked out without looking at anyone. His attorney followed, already distancing himself. I sat frozen in my chair, Sharon's hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said quietly. Truth spoke. He heard it. Rebecca came over, tears in her eyes. Someone finally believed us. I looked at the evidence folders spread across our table. 17 recordings, hundreds of documents, the meticulous timeline that had saved my daughter. Performance had met evidence, and evidence had won. The final strike of the gavel wasn't just a sound. It was the closing of a tomb on the version of reality Darius had tried to build. Judge Richardson's voice remained steady as she read the ruling, but the words felt like heavy, restorative stones being laid back into a wall that had been systematically demolished. Full legal and physical custody was granted to Ella. Darius was relegated to supervised visitation, contingent on a rigorous, court-mandated psychological evaluation and intensive therapy. Beside her, Ella felt the phantom weight of the past months begin to lift, though it didn't disappear entirely. She looked over at Darius. He didn't turn his head. There was no theatrical outburst, no final plea for the cameras he had once courted, and no charismatic mask left to wear. He simply stood, buttoned his blazer, and walked out of the courtroom without a single backward glance at the woman he had tried to ruin or the daughter he had used as a pawn. It was the ultimate cowardice, a silence that proved he had never been fighting for Zara, only against Ella. The weeks that followed were not the euphoric victory Ella had imagined in her darkest hours. Healing, she quickly learned, was a jagged, non-linear thing. It was found in the quiet, sterile hallways of Dr. Torres's office, where Zara spent 45 minutes every Tuesday engaged in play therapy. Through the observation mirror, Ella watched her daughter move tiny plastic figures through a dollhouse. Zara was slowly, painstakingly dismantling the script Darius had written for her, peeling back the layers of a story she had been forced to tell until she no longer knew what was real. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening. The house was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic hum of the dishwasher. Zara was sitting on the floor, her crayons spread out, when she stopped and looked up at Ella with eyes that seemed decades older than 6. "Mama?" she whispered. "Why did Daddy want me to lie? Why did he want me to say those mean things?" The air in the room seemed to thin. Ella knelt on the carpet, keeping her movements slow and grounded. She had rehearsed this moment with the therapist a dozen times, yet her heart still hammered against her ribs. She chose the truth, filtered through the gentle lens of a mother's protection. "Sometimes, Zara, people we love make very bad choices because they are hurt or angry inside," Ella said, her voice unwavering. "Daddy was trying to win a fight, and he forgot that you weren't part of the fight. He used words that weren't true to try and get what he wanted. But that was his choice, not yours. It was never, ever your fault." Zara looked down at her crayon, a bright cerulean blue. "He told me it was a secret game, that if I didn't say it, you'd have to go away." Ella felt a surge of cold fury at the depth of the manipulation, but she kept her face soft. She reached out and tucked a stray curl behind Zara's ear. "I'm never going away. No secret can ever make that happen. We're safe now." That night, after Zara fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, Ella didn't go to bed. She sat at her laptop and opened the master file that had become her lifeline. She documented the conversation, every word, every inflection. She wasn't doing it for a judge anymore. She was doing it for Zara's future self. One day, the girl would have questions that a 6-year-old couldn't process, and Ella would have the record ready to show her that she had been heard, defended, and believed. As the season turned, Ella found herself drawn to a small community center on the edge of the city. It was a support group for parents who had survived high-conflict custody battles and false allegations. Standing at the front of the room, Ella felt a strange sense of kinship with the weary faces looking back at her. She didn't offer platitudes. Instead, she shared her timeline template, the meticulous color-coded spreadsheet that had turned a he-said-she-said nightmare into a verifiable sequence of facts. "They will try to make you look crazy," she told the group, "because crazy is easy to dismiss, but documented is impossible to ignore. Your sanity isn't a feeling, it's a record." The final session of Zara's first 3-month block of therapy ended with a drawing. Dr. Torres called Ella into the room and pointed to the paper on the small wooden table. It was a picture of 3 figures standing in a park. On the far left, a tall man stood alone, rendered in a faint, receding gray. On the right, 2 figures, a woman and a little girl, were drawn in vibrant, primary colors. They were holding hands so tightly their fingers overlapped. "She's rewriting the story," the therapist whispered to Ella. "This takes time, but the foundation is finally solid." Walking out into the cool evening air, Ella felt a profound sense of stillness. She realized then that she hadn't saved Zara by being a perfect mother. She had saved her by refusing to be erased. She had saved her by being believed. And in a world where performance often masked the truth, being believed had required the one thing Darius couldn't manufacture: evidence that couldn't be performed away. They walked to the car, Zara skipping slightly ahead. The rebuilding process was slow, brick by brick, but for the first time in a year, the ground beneath them didn't feel like it was about to give way.